It's time to say goodbye to one generation and hello to another. That's this week on Motoring 2006.
TSN's Motoring 2006 is brought to you by the new Q from Quaker State. Unleash all your horses.
It's called the Windy City, but in my books, the city of Chicago is one of the most beautiful cities in the entire world. And this is the location selected by one of the world's most successful automotive companies to unveil the 8th generation of its most important car, a vehicle that contributes to over 50% of the company's bottom line. The company's name is Honda, and the car's name is the Civic. And you know, since 1973, they have sold over 1.2 million Civics, and the Civic, again today, is still the #1 selling car in Canada. But you know, there's some new kids on the block, the Mazda 3, the Cobalt, the Mini, and so on, and the block is getting a little crowded, putting pressure on the Civic to hang on to that #1 position. But you know, Honda believes this new generation Civic will not only ease that pressure, it'll also set a new benchmark in its class.
The Civic's been very important to Honda over the years. It was obviously the very first car that we introduced. It brought Honda into the North American market. It's the first vehicle we produced. It's always been the technology leader. It's always been a very important part of our business. Right now it accounts for about 45% of our Canadian sales, so obviously the launch of each generation of Civic is critical to the company.
This new 8th generation Civic really resets what Civic is in North America. And there's 4 different models this time: a coupe, sedan, SI, and a hybrid, with the SI being the halo for the coupe and the hybrid being the halo model for the sedan. I think the style actually works really well for 2 reasons. One, the sedan actually looks really good in motion and works really well as a hybrid. It gives a very futuristic look. And the coupe's nice because it's finally differentiated from the sedan. In the past, the coupe has always been kind of a 2-door sedan, but this time has its own style, its own personality, and will be easily recognizable as a coupe, yet still a member of the Civic family. There's one powertrain available for the sedan. It's a new iVTEC 1.8 liter. It's 140 horsepower, 129 pound-feet of torque. Coupe carries over that same engine, the 1.8, in the DX, DXG, LX, and EX models, but the kind of coup de grace is the SI, which has a 197 DOHC iVTEC, the brand new K-Series motor. The SI is huge for us, and especially the sporty sound, the aggressive feel. The SI is at home on the track, and I think everyone can feel that today. The best thing is to actually hear the car go by. The sporty sound was something that we really focused on during development. We think it's kind of a new value in sporty sound. It really takes it to a level where Honda's never been before, because we have it both on the intake and the exhaust. And just to hear the cars lapping the track and just screaming at redline is just really satisfying after we worked so hard on that.
50% of their sales are Civic sales, so obviously they're very focused on making this car a success. I think releasing 4 versions right off the bat is a big indicator of that. I mean, they want to hit every market segment. They don't want to miss anything. So I think this, for them to make money, they need to make the Civic successful.
What is the market for this? What made this car so popular, you think?
I think the Civic, the timing is everything in some cases. When it first came out was during the oil embargo early on in the 70s. So that basically gave us the beachhead to establish ourselves. But since then, I think it's been the fact that it's always been a very spirited, fun-to-drive vehicle, but it also has drivability, reliability, and quality.
I think where Honda really got successful was that they made good, boring cars. Reliable, safe, all that stuff. So a lot of people received their first Civic from their parents, and then that's sort of where the whole tuner thing got started, saying, I don't want to drive what my parents drive, but you know what, I don't have money to buy a new car, so let me take what they have and make it cool. And that's really where the whole tuning scene came about. The SI is definitely an improvement over the last SI, so it's definitely going to make an impression in the market, in the tuner market especially.
I think we've been very fortunate in Canada. The Civic does better proportionally in Canada than it does in the US, and likewise in Europe. So we've been very fortunate that it's a car that Canadians have embraced, and we hope they continue to embrace it.
As Pogo the Possum used to say, I have seen the enemy, and he is us. More later on Kenzie's Corner.
When Bob Lutz was in charge of Chrysler's sheet metal, he gave us the PT Cruiser. Now, of course, he's in charge of GM's sheet metal, and so this car should come as very little surprise. This is the Chevrolet Heritage High Roof, or HHR as it's more commonly known. The HHR blends the past with the present, the old bit being inspired by a 1949 Chevy Suburban, the new by the outlandishly funky SSR. The result is a vehicle that is boxy but loud combination of the extremes. Now, some people found the look pleasing. Unfortunately, the majority found it, well, let's just say less than handsome. One thing's for sure, it's got road presence. As with the PT Cruiser, this HHR is quite versatile when you get to the back end. You get a storage bin that sits beneath this plastic shelf. Now, it goes in this way up, which gives you a flat floor, or this way up, which gives you a bunch more tie downs. It can also be mounted in an elevated position, which gives you a privacy cover and two-tier storage. There are, however, a couple of problems. Number one, me and the tailgate have become real good friends over the course of this test drive. I'm less than 5'10", and I keep catching my head. Anybody that's 6 foot, well, you're looking at this sharp edge. The other problem, while you do get a rear wiper, it only sweeps to here. It should sweep down to here. It's better than nothing, but only just. When it comes to power, there are two apt descriptors, enough and lacking. The up-level LT model gets a 2.4 litre engine that pushes 172 horsepower and 162 pound-feet of torque through a 5-speed manual to the front wheels. Now, this delivers spirited, if far from fast, performance. The LS tested here, however, comes with a 2.2 litre version of GM's Ecotec engine, minus the variable valve timing used on its larger sibling. As a result, it only pushes 143 horses and 150 pounds-feet of torque. Consequently, well, getting from rest to 100k, it takes a while, 10.6 seconds to be exact. Likewise, it takes over 9 seconds to get from canter to full gallop. Now, this is with the manual box. The automatic transmission, it's going to blunt performance even further. You know, considering the dimensions of the HHR, the backseat room, well, it's generous. There's enough room underneath the front seat for your toes, there's plenty of knee room, a ton of headroom because of the high roof line, and of course there's plenty of elbow room. You also get a front seat that folds forward. Now, the real use for this is when you've got this seat folded down, well, you can carry an 8 or 10 foot ladder inside the vehicle with the tailgate shut. It does, however, have a second use, and probably not what it's designed for. On a long trip, it makes for a lovely riding position. As for handling, well, the HHR takes cruising comfort to heart. The front struts and semi-independent rear torsion beam suspensions allow quite a lot of body roll at moderate speeds, and this in spite of anti-roll bars at both ends. Ramp up to a true corner carving velocity, and tyre squeal and understeer become constant companions. All of this is a disappointment considering the stiff cobalt-based platform. Having said that, considering its position and life, part wagon, part SUV, it's more than a match for the PT Cruiser. You know, up front, the HHR has been quite well thought through. The seats are comfortable, they sit high enough off the floor so you get a commanding view of the road ahead. They've got comfortable armrests. You get nice quality plastics throughout, decent radio, and a nice set of dials on the dash. There are, however, two pet peeves. Putting the power window switches at the bottom of the center stack is plain dumb. They need to be on the door panel. The other problem? There's no dead pedal. What you get instead is a soggy bit of carpet. On a long trip, it forces your ankle up at an awkward angle, and so your foot goes to sleep. Where the HHR did impress is in the braking department. In the past, I've taken GM to task for its mushy pedal feel and mediocre stopping distances. The HHR not only has a crisp pedal feel, it actually stops quickly and with the minimum of fuss. Nice one, for once anyway. You know, the timing of this HHR is very curious because most people consider the PT Cruiser to be past its prime. Maybe GM knows something the rest of the industry doesn't. That's a question that remains to be answered. What's for sure? This vehicle is going to go one of two ways. It'll either be relatively successful or it'll be another Aztec.
Time to update our long-term tester Dodge Dakota pickup. Now this pickup has the high output version of the 4.7 liter single overhead cam V8. More than enough power for this particular vehicle. There's two versions of this V8. I've driven both, and believe me, they've both got more than adequate power. With the high output version, premium fuel is recommended but not absolutely required. Now with the premium fuel in this engine, you'll get a little bit more zip and a little bit better fuel economy. We've checked it both ways and it definitely does work. But of course you've got more expensive fuel going in the tank. Now, the thing that I like about a small displacement V8, I just love a V8 in a pickup truck. They sound great, great drivability, great torque off the line, and they last forever. If you go with a small displacement V8, and by that I mean under 5 liters, and just about everybody that's got a V8 truck has got one engine under 5 liters, you're going to get V8 durability, V8 performance without paying a huge penalty on fuel economy. And believe me, in today's world, that's the route to go. In our next update of the long-term test Dakota, I'll tell you about my pet peeve that I found with this truck.
Today's program is really to give the journalists an opportunity to test drive our latest vehicle, and that's the IS 250 and 350. And we've taken our journalists out to Downsview Airport so they can really test the dynamics of this new exciting new sports sedan. This is our sports sedan, and so it's the entry into the Lexus lineup, and it's designed for a younger buyer or somebody that's younger at heart anyways. And there's 3 models available. We have an IS 250, which is a 2.5 liter engined vehicle, and it's available rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive. And then we also have a third vehicle, the IS 350, which is a 306 horsepower V6 power machine, basically.
There is 4 available transmissions, 1 manual 6-speed transmission that is in the IS 250 rear-wheel drive. The IS 250 all-wheel drive and IS 350 come with a 6-speed sequential automatic transmission depending on the configuration. The new IS series utilizes what's called the L-Finesse design styling, which is a new design approach that Lexus has undertaken. L-Finesse for the IS series takes some styling cues from the GS that was recently introduced, as well as other Lexus concept cars. It looks at contradictions in terms. It looks at some simple yet sophisticated, looks at sporty yet elegant.
I think what makes this vehicle unique is first of all, its horsepower. I mean, with a 0 to 60 time of 5.3 seconds, it's probably 1.1 seconds faster than the BMW 330. It's available with all-wheel drive, which takes on some of our key competitors. I think the styling is something that should really differentiate ourselves from our competitors. And the fact it's still a Lexus. It offers superb refinement inside the vehicle, great quality, and a great customer experience.
Meet Danny Joseph, who works for Honda Canada. Well, we first met him when Honda was unveiling its new generation Odyssey. Danny's 28, and we asked him if, even though he works for Honda, would he be caught dead in a minivan?
Right now I'm 26 and not quite in the minivan demographic yet, but down the road, if I did, granted I'm biased, but Odyssey would be right up there. If not, it would be number one on my list.
Now, the Honda Civic is definitely a car for a 28-year-old like Danny, but what I didn't tell you is Danny is 6'8". Now, could he get in one of these vehicles?
In my line of work, I drive all kinds of cars. Personally, I own an Accord, and this is the smallest one Honda makes now, the new Civic Si. I have no problem fitting in it, and that's not the company line.
Yeah, sure, Danny, but seeing is believing. All right, let's head to the Quaker State Garage and join Bill Gardner.
Brad, I don't care if you can fit a giraffe in the Honda Civic. To me, when you talk about the Honda Motor Company, it's all about engine technology. They have to be the world's premier engine builder today. I don't think there's any question about that. They're always pushing the envelope. They're always on the leading edge of engine technology. I stopped by a Honda showroom just the other day, had a look at the new Civic, and I noticed a couple of key features about the engine. First of all, I noticed that there's no more timing belt in the engine driving the camshaft. They've gone to a chain, which means zero maintenance now. It used to be that you had to change that timing belt periodically after so many kilometers or so many years so it didn't break. And it became increasingly difficult to do that on many cars because of all the accessories attached to the engine, and with cars getting more and more aerodynamic, the engine was kind of crammed in a tough spot there, and it was tough to get at the timing belt to change it. The Civic was one of the easier ones, but some cars were really difficult. So going back to chain is really an advantage. The other thing I noticed was that the exhaust manifold is gone. They don't have an exhaust manifold on that engine. The exhaust passageways are cast right into the head of the engine, and the catalytic converter bolts right up to the front of the engine where the exhaust pipe goes on right at the front. And I assume that they've probably done that in order to get the catalytic converter to light off faster. In other words, come up to its operating temperature where it can reduce exhaust emissions to near zero. So by moving it closer to the engine and doing away with the manifold, which gives up a lot of heat into the atmosphere, they're likely getting that converter to light off faster. Now, obviously it reduces one more part, and it eliminates gasket leaks, broken studs, and other problems that can go along with manifolds. Honda didn't have that problem with their manifolds, but other manufacturers do. So I think it's a win-win situation all the way around. And talking about engine technology, you wouldn't think you'd get a whole lot of engine technology in the lowly lawnmower, but years ago when Honda got in the lawnmower business, they came out with an overhead valve engine when everybody else had a side valve engine, or what in the automotive industry you would refer to as a flathead engine. Flathead engines don't give a lot of power, the exhaust emissions are fairly high, and they consume quite a bit of oil. Honda went overhead valve. A few years later, Briggs & Stratton and Toro and all the other mower manufacturers countered with their own overhead valve engines. As soon as they played that card, Honda trumped them by coming out with an overhead cam lawnmower engine. This is one right here, and this was the world's first engine, overhead cam engine with an internal timing belt. In other words, the timing belt that turns the camshaft is inside the crankcase, bathed by and immersed in the motor oil that's lubricating the rest of the engine. Now, you wouldn't think that that's possible because timing belts normally don't like to get oil on them and they disintegrate. Obviously, Honda's made that belt out of a special material to withstand the engine oil, but it just goes to show you how they're always proving things wrong and doing things that other people can't do, and they're usually the first to do it. And they give you all this engine technology in a lawnmower overhead cam for $399. You can't beat it. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2006.
It's kind of ironic that almost 50 years ago, Ford tried to sell safety to the general public by offering deep dish steering wheels and seat belts as options in their cars. Nobody bought them. But now, well, people won't buy a car if it only has a 4-star crash test rating instead of a 5-star. Now, I'm all in favor of safety, and I'm glad the general public is more concerned than it used to be. But you know, I don't put a whole lot of stake in these crash tests. First of all, they're one car into one type of barrier. Now, there's 2 organizations that do these tests, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration in the States and also the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. The tests they do are slightly different, but the ratings usually come out fairly consistent. My question is, does that one crash test in a lab under particularly tight controlled conditions correlate to the real world? I don't know that anybody's ever done any studies on that. Now, we do know some conclusions we can draw from crash tests. Generally speaking, a big heavy car does better than a smaller car. But even that's not always true, because in the real world we know that Saab is one of the safest cars you can be in a crash, and it's a mid-size. So all things are not equal. But the main concern I have with these crash tests, it puts the emphasis in the wrong place. There's a whole bunch of things that contribute to your safety behind the wheel. The type of road you're driving on, for example, freeways are much safer than arterial roads because it's pretty hard to get a head-on crash on a freeway. At least you hope so. So even though you're going faster, you're safer. Cities are also pretty dangerous, even though you're only going 50 kilometers an hour, because a T-bone crash, somebody runs a red light, that's gonna hurt. But the most important thing is that the significant factor, the most critical issue to your safety behind the wheel isn't the car, it isn't the road, it's you. I'm Jim Kenzie.
Earlier I told you how important the Civic is to Honda. Well, in the month of August 2005, Honda had a record sales month, and they sold just over 15,000 Hondas, not including Acura, and 9,200 of those were Civics. So there you go. Oh, incidentally, I got some bad news from the Honda people. In their technical presentation, they said the future is now Generation Y and not the baby boomers. So if you're like me, we've very quickly become irrelevant. Couple of quick thoughts on the new Civic. The SI goes like stink. You don't even have to tune it to have some fun. And as for the sedan, well, it's practical, the quality's there, huge trunk, and I think even the styling is a little better. And of course, Graham will have even a closer look on a future test drive. That's it for now. We'll see you next time out as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
We understand that in other markets, in Europe in particular, subcompacts are cool, they're urban. That's what we're trying to launch here in Canada.
TSN's Motoring 2006 has been brought to you by the new Q from Quaker State. Unleash all your horses.